Hello everyone, my name is Sulabh. I am the cybersecurity expert. So in this video we are going to talk about what are the type of Splunk deployment, what are the various components of Splunk, and what are the various deployment architecture of Splunk. So basically Splunk has two type of deployment. One is Splunk Cloud and another is Splunk Enterprise. So the name itself suggests Splunk Cloud. That means all the components of our Splunk are hosted on the cloud, right? And it's on the Splunk Cloud. So if you want to go with the Splunk Cloud, you don't have to deploy yourself. All the components of the Splunk are pre-deployed by the Splunk itself. You just pay for the license and get the access, configure it based on your requirement. So also you don't have to manage the component yourself. Splunk will manage for you, as well as the config. If you go for the Splunk Cloud, it is faster because it's already deployed. You just have to configure it. So deployment will be faster if you are going with this Splunk Cloud. Another type of deployment is Splunk Enterprise. So Splunk Enterprise is the on-premises deployment. That means you have to deploy all components of Splunk on your own premises, on your own data center. Got it? Fine. So Splunk Enterprise takes more time for deployment compared to Splunk Cloud. Why? Because you have to plan the infrastructure, you have to deploy yourself, as well as you have to manage from health perspective also, daily routine perspective also, you have to manage yourself, right? So that is the basic difference between the Splunk Cloud and Splunk Enterprise. So here let's talk about the various component of Splunk. So there are three components of Splunk, main component of Splunk: forwarders, indexer, and search head. So forwarder, let me draw the basic architecture here. What are the various components we have in the Splunk? So there are three basic component, main component that Splunk has. First component is forwarder or forwarders, because these components can have multiple, right? So forwarders, indexer, and search head. Okay, so I'm talking about right, Splunk can be used as a data analytics perspective as well as from SIEM perspective. So in this video I'm going to talk about mainly from SIEM perspective. The only difference is, for SIEM perspective we'll be getting the log from network security servers devices, while from data analytics perspective we can receive the log from n number of any kind of machine which generate the data. So basically I'll be talking about from SIEM perspective. That means we'll be talking about from network security devices perspective. So you can see there are three components of Splunk. One is forwarder, another is indexer, another is search head, right? So let me draw other things as well. So this is router, Windows server or systems, let's say firewall, switch, right? So there are three components: forwarders, indexer, and searcher. So forwarder is the component of Splunk which is responsible for receiving the logs from end devices. That means network devices, security devices, servers, application, databases in case of SIEM, and from any other devices in case you are using as a data analytics tool. So since we are analyzing from SIEM perspective, the forwarder is the component of Splunk which is responsible for receiving the logs from various devices, right? So once it receives the logs, it passes the logs, filter out the logs, and send it to indexer, right? So what are the activity forwarder is doing? It will receiving, what activity? Receiving, parsing, and filtering. Receiving, parsing and filtering. Receiving means it will be responsible to receive the log from various devices, right? From SIEM perspective, we have to receive the log from network devices, security devices, servers, application, databases, right? So Splunk component visit forwarder, which will be responsible for collecting the logs from all the network security devices and servers, applications, etc. And once it receives the logs, before it forward the logs to the indexer, it will parse the logs. Parse the logs in the sense that the devices which are recording the activity in the form of logs, those devices logs we call as raw logs, right? Raw logs in the sense, why we call as raw logs? Because if you log in on these devices, you will see that those logs are being recorded on the file, and we call as raw logs because under one log file you will see the all logs, all logs. Let's say 1,000 of logs you will see on the same file. On the same file you will see 1,000 of logs, right? So there is no, there is no breaking down the event, that is first event, this is second event, this is third event, this is fourth event, right? Let's say first event start from, let's say, time equal to this one, source equal to this one, destination equal to this one, like that. Second log may start from here, third log may start from here. So it's a kind of messed up, right? It's very difficult to understand from where the new log is starting, right? And which is source IP, destination IP, from where. So it's a kind of mess up, right? If you gather the logs directly on the Splunk index, it will be difficult for you to read it, right? So what Splunk will do is, Splunk forwarder, once it will receive the logs, it will parse the logs. Parsing is nothing but the breaking down the logs, raw logs, into the event, into the parse event. Parse event means it will just break down the event. Let's say it will show like source is equal to this one, destination is equal to this one, source port is equal to this one, destination port is equal to this one, right? It is one event, then two event, then three event, right? So based on the time, it will start from the time. So based on the time, it will break down the event, right? So that you can easily understand compared to the raw logs. So that is called as parsing. So parsing is nothing but the breaking down the event into the column, right, with the keeping the same field set. It is not changing the field set. Whatever fields are being captured on the logs, same field it will keep while parsing. But you can easily discriminate the event, that is the first event, that is the second event, that is the third event, and these are the field set, right? So once your forwarder receive the logs, it will parse the event, right? And before sending to the indexer, we can also apply the filtering on the forwarder. Filtering means to filter out, to drop off the unnecessary event, which you might not require on the index on the other component from searching and reporting perspective, right? You may not require to keep it in the Splunk. So those unnecessary logs you can drop off on the forwarder level before it reach out to the indexer to keep the log for long time. Maybe let's say you have integrated Windows device, right? In Windows devices, by default you checked security logs only from security perspective, but under the security logs also, you might receive some logs under security logs which might not require from security monitoring perspective or from audit or compliance perspective. But Windows is showing security logs, so it is forwarding the logs, but those logs are unnecessarily it will use the resources like your forwarder resources to forward the logs, your bandwidth between the forwarder and indexer, license, your hard disk storage of the indexer, right, to keep the log for a long time. So those logs are unnecessarily, right? So in order to optimize your resources, you can apply the filtering also on the forwarder, right? So before forward the logs to the indexer, it will drop off unnecessarily log on the forwarder, right? So forwarder will collect the logs, parse the logs, and filter out the event before it sends the logs to the indexer, right? Forwarder also have the cache memory, that is called as cache is the temporary memory that will call as persistent queue on the index on the Splunk language. We call it persistent queue, right? So what happens in case indexer is not available, right? Splunk forwarder collect the log, indexer is not available. So in that case, forwarder will keep the logs on the cache, that is called persistent queue, right? It will keep the logs here, and once the indexer comes up, it will start forwarding the logs, right? So in the normal situation, if you deploy this component as a forwarder do not keep the logs, do not hold the logs, right? As soon as it will receive the logs, it will parse the logs, filter out the logs, and send to the indexer, right? In the normal situation, it does not keep the logs. However, If you want to keep the logs on the Splunk forwarder also, you can upload the indexer license. So it will, it will keep one copy on its own database here, forwarder, and one copy it will send to the indexer. But in that case, if you are keeping one copy on the forwarder, you have to apply the Splunk indexer license, right? However, if you are just going with the forwarder to keep to receive the log and forward the logs in indexer, you don't have to apply the indexer license. That means it's a free license. You don't have to pay for the Splunk Enterprise license if you are not keeping the logs or not keeping the local copy of the log on the forwarder. Get a point? So that is the forwarder. Indexer now. Another component of Splunk is called as indexer. So indexer is the component of Splunk which is responsible for for receiving the logs from forwarders, as well as it can also receive the logs from end devices directly. Right? So indexer work is receiving, parsing, then receiving, parsing, then licensing, then after licensing you will have indexing and writing on the disk for long time. Indexing, then writing on the disk on the long time, then writing on the disk for long time. Okay, writing for the disk on the long time. So indexer can also receive the logs directly from the end devices. So it can also receive the log from the forwarder as well, right? So generally we are not directly receiving the logs on the indexer, because if indexer will receive the log directly, it has to parse the event also, right? And since indexing and other work is done by the by the indexer itself, so in order to avoid to do the load balancing or to avoid overhead on the indexer, we may have one component called as forwarder. So forwarder will receive the logs, do the parsing, filtering, and it will send the logs to the indexer. So indexer then will not have to receive the log from end device directly, it will just receive the logs from forwarder, and forwarder has already done the parsing. So in that case, indexer will not have to do the parsing. So this parsing work, receiving from the end device can be removed if you already have the forwarder. So in that case, if you already have forwarder, indexer will just receive the log from the forwarder, and it do not have to parse the event, right? Because parsing the event, it takes the memory and it takes the CPU, right? So if you have already forwarder, then it will just receive the log from forwarder and it will not parse the logs directly. Once it will receive the logs, it can it have the license meter. So indexer require the paid license, right? So how many numbers of logs you are receiving per day, how much GB of logs you are receiving per day. On the next video, I will be talking about the licensing, right? So how much logs you are receiving, based on that you have to pay for the license. So license meter run, how many numbers of log you are receiving, based on that license meter will be run. That means license will be calculated, and after license calculation, another thing is called as compression. I forgot to mention here, that is compression. If you want to enable the compression, once it receives the logs, license meter will run, then it can compress the logs. It can compress the logs to reduce the to disk reduce the space, right? It can compress the logs, then index the logs. Indexing means indexing is kind of organized way, right? Indexing means it will organize on the special format, special way. It will organize. Right? Indexing means if you apply the indexing on anything, it will be easy for you to find out some specific things, right? You have the notebook. On the notebook, or you have the you might have seen the book in first, second page, you have the indexes. So using the indexes, you can easily find out which topic you have in which page, right? Similarly, the indexing is done by the indexer. After indexing, it will write the logs on the disk, that means storage. It will write the logs on the storage. So indexer can hold the logs for long time, based on your company requirement, based on your compliance or audit requirement, or based on the security or forensics requirement. You can keep the log for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 years, based on your requirement, right? You just have to add the storage so that you can hold the log for long time, right? So this is the work of indexer. Another, another component of Splunk is search head. So search head basically is the component of Splunk Enterprise, or which is responsible for searching the logs on the indexer, right? So indexer is keeping the log for a long time, right? What you can do is you can deploy one component Splunk search head. You can just give the IP address of indexer on the search head, right? So you have the search bar here. You can put the query and Splunk search head will search the log on the indexer. That means it will retrieve the log from the indexer and display here, right? So you can search the log, you can download the reporting, and you can create the dashboard. Searching the reporting you can do here, right? So keeping the log for a long time, you put an indexer, and searching the reporting you do from the search head. So creating the reports, dashboard, exporting the reports, visualization you can do on the search head. But you might be thinking about, there are many people are confused, then where we can do the real-time monitoring. If you watch my previous video, what is SIEM, then we understood that another motive for the SIEM is real-time monitoring, correlation and alerting. In the sense, if any kind of suspicious activity happening, your Splunk, your SIEM should alert you instead of monitoring the base logs which are coming from the end devices. So here indexer is keeping the base logs, right? Logs which are coming from end devices, and here you just have a search feature that you can search the logs. Real time also, if you want to monitor the logs, you can monitor, but it does not give the feature for real time monitoring, correlation and alerting, right? So that alert will trigger and you can investigate further and take the active action, right? So in order to do that, you have one more app, that is called as Splunk Enterprise Security. Splunk Enterprise Security, right? So Splunk Enterprise Security is an app, is a separate application, premium application. You don't have to deploy on the separate server. What you can do is, over the Splunk search head only, you can deploy Splunk Enterprise Security. So Splunk Enterprise Security is a premium app which enables you for searching for real-time monitoring, correlation and alerting. So basically from SIEM perspective, people who work on Splunk SIEM, they actually monitor the environment 24/7 on this over the search head by selecting this Splunk Enterprise Security. So real-time monitoring, correlation, alerting, we actually do on the Splunk Enterprise Security. So these all components you see, there is a free trial available, but Splunk Enterprise Security is the premium app. License is required. That's the reason most of the people who you will see in the market are teaching on the Splunk Enterprise, they don't have this Splunk Enterprise Security, right? But from security perspective, you guys, everyone is actually working on the at the end, they will be monitoring the real time on the Splunk Enterprise Security. It's very important to have the hands-on, to have the understanding of Splunk Enterprise Security in order to work from cyber security perspective, right? So this is the these are the component of Splunk Enterprise. Now if you talk about more on the forwarders are of two types. One is universal forwarder and another is heavy forwarder. So universal forwarder is we can install on the end devices, is a small lightweight client. Universal forwarder are the lightweight client that we can install on the Windows server, Linux server, Solaris, iOS, right? So end devices we can install, not the network and security devices we cannot install, but we can install on the servers and systems. So those are a lightweight client that you can install on the end devices, and once it those client will collect the logs locally and then can send it to the heavy forwarder or directly to the indexer, right? So universal forwarder are the lightweight client that we install on the end device. All the device, if you have 100 of Windows server, you can install the agent, that means universal forwarder, on all 100 of servers, right? It will collect the logs locally and send the logs to the heavy forwarder or indexer directly. So, heavy forwarder, if you talk about heavy forwarder, is a full-fledged Splunk Enterprise component which can collect the logs locally, remotely, using pull or push mechanism from the end devices such as routers, such as firewall, IPS, IDS, remotely pull and push mechanism, right? It does not require the client to be installed. Or if you have already installed universal forwarder can further forward the logs to heavy forwarder, and heavy forwarder forward the logs to the indexer. Why we need heavy forwarder? Even though you have this agent install universal forwarder, because universal forwarder do not do the parsing, right? So parsing is breaking down the event. So even though you have the universal forwarder, still you have to, you have to deploy the heavy forwarder so that it will do the parsing. If you do not deploy heavy forwarder here, then directly log will be sent to the indexer. Then indexer will have to do the parsing. It will be overhead for the indexer. That's the reason, even though you have the universal forwarder, you may have to deploy the heavy forwarder, right? So heavy forwarder is a full-fledged Splunk Enterprise. It will be deployed in separate server. Separate server we have to deploy the heavy forwarder and pull and push mechanism. It can receive the log from end devices as well as from the universal forwarder. It will parse the logs, filter out the logs, and send the logs to the indexer. So this is about the heavy forward type of forwarder, and like two type of forwarder, heavy forwarder as well as universal forwarder, right? So in the later period, if you watch my more videos, I'll be talking about what are the difference, and will deep dive on the heavy forwarder as well as universal forwarder. What are the difference and why we need to deploy universal forwarder even though we have the heavy forwarder? Because using the heavy forwarder also you can receive the logs. Then why we need the client, right? So this is in Splunk there are two components, there are two installable only. There are two set of file for the Splunk. One is Splunk Enterprise, and another is universal forwarder. Many of the people are confused. They understand that Splunk has three component forwarders, indexer and search head. What they are doing is they are searching on the Google, download Splunk indexer, download Splunk heavy forwarder, download search head, Splunk search head, right? But for all these three components, only one set of file is there, that is called as Splunk Enterprise. Get in mind? So if you want to install heavy forwarder or indexer or search head, same set of file you have to run. If you run this set of file, you can install, you can configure as heavy forwarder or indexer or search head. If you install it, all the installation will look like same. You log in on the this is Splunk Enterprise. This one all are same. Because heavy forwarder, indexer and searcher all are Splunk Enterprise only. It looks like same, only the configuration difference is there, right? Let's say you deploy one Splunk Enterprise on this server, one Splunk Enterprise on this server, one Splunk Enterprise on this server, right? So if you log in on the Splunk Enterprise web, right, and configure receiving as well as forwarding, it will act as a heavy forwarder because it will do the receiving and by default do the parsing and it will forward the event. Receiving, forwarding, heavy forwarder, right? If you install this Splunk Enterprise here and configure receiving and indexing, means keeping the logs for a long time, it will be called as indexer. If you install one Splunk Enterprise here and do not configure receiving and indexing, you just configure on the searching and give the IP address on the indexer, it will act as a search head, right? So by default, all the Splunk Enterprise deployment will have all the feature. It's all in one deployment. That means it can receive the logs, parse the logs, index the logs, keep the log for a long time, and it has the searching feature also. All this Splunk Enterprise. But why we are deploying different components so that we can load balance. Right? Because if one Splunk component will do all the work, it will be overhead. Maybe many users are there to search, right? Many logs you are searching, huge number of logs are you receiving, so it will be overhead for the single instance of the Splunk. That's the reason we go with the multi-instance of the Splunk. So this architecture, when you have multiple forwarder, multiple indexer and multiple search head, when we have separate forwarder, separate indexer and separate search head, we call this Splunk architecture as a distributed architecture. This architecture is called as distributed architecture. And under distributed architecture, you have cluster architecture also. In the cluster architecture, you may have multiple forwarder, multiple indexer and multiple search head. If you are receiving, so how many search head is needed? Whether you need separate forwarder, separate indexer, separate search head, and how many indexer, how many search heads needed, right? It is based on how much logs you are receiving, how many users are logging, how many users are searching, At the same time, how many reports you are scheduling, how many dashboard you are creating, right? Based on that resource you will utilize, and based on that you will decide how many indexer, how many searcher, and how many forwarders are needed on your environment. There is a document by the Splunk where you can evaluate how many forwarders you are going to receive, going to install, how many how much logs you are going to receive, how many users are going to log in, how many reports you are scheduling. Based on that you can do the sizing. There is a document available on the Splunk, right? So so basically Splunk has the two deployment architecture. One is single instance architecture. Single instance architecture, that means all in one, means you install one Splunk Enterprise component which will do the receiving also, parsing also, filtering also, licensing also, compression, keep the log for a long time, and searching and reporting also, right? That means all in one single instance Splunk deployment, right? Another is distributed architecture, where you will have separate component, and under distributed architecture you may have cluster architecture also, where you will have multiple forwarders, multiple indexer, and multiple search head, right? So this is there are two types of architecture of Splunk deployment. One is single instance, another is distributed architecture, and under distributed you may have Splunk cluster architecture deployment as well. So based on the sizing that I explained you may decide which architecture you want to go for. Generally single instance architecture, where one Splunk Enterprise will be performing all the functions, can be used on the lab environment as well as on the departmental store, very small organization where only some set of forwarders are there, maybe 2-3 users are login, right? So based on that you can go with the single instance architecture. Now for all the enterprise companies, you see you may have distributed architecture, under which you may have multiple indexer, multiple search head, as well as multiple forwarders. I hope you have liked this video. So if you want to start your career in cybersecurity or in Splunk, or if you want to enhance your knowledge and want to become the expert in this Splunk, you can join our in-depth training in Splunk, where you'll get the access on all the components of Splunk, including Splunk Enterprise Security. So this training would be completely real-time training, what experience people are actually doing in the company, all we are going to cover here practically, and you will do the hands-on on the lab environment. So be working like an experience. Nobody will be able to judge whether you gone through the training only or you have the experience. Or if you want to watch more such video, you can subscribe our channel, like and comment what you are expecting here. Thank you everyone. Bye.